You ever see a kid take a step and suddenly it feels like the whole room is holding its breath? I'm not talking about the polished kind of step you'd see on a dance floor. I mean the shaky, uneven, please don't let me fall kind of step that makes you wonder who's really leading and who's just pretending. That's how it started for me, anyway. I was sitting in the Bellamy Room, this quiet, swanky little restaurant tucked away in the city, where people went to pretend life was softer than it was outside. Jazz in the air, low lighting, all that. But let me back up a sec. There was this boy, Jamie, 8 years old, tucked into a booth with his dad. You could tell right away something was different about him. His shoulders hunched, feet tucked under the table, like he wanted to disappear. The kind of kid who'd seen a little too much of the wrong kind of attention. Jamie had this thing with his legs, a neurological thing, made them twist and buckle whenever they felt like it. He'd had an accident at a museum once, fell hard in front of everyone, and after that, you could see it in his eyes. He always checked the room before he stood up, like he was bracing for another round of laughter that wasn't exactly mean, but wasn't kind either. His dad, Harlan, was the type who loved hard but quiet. You know what I mean? Real estate guy, widower, all business, the kind who protected his son by keeping the world out and everything else on a short leash. They didn't get out much. The Bellamy was one of the few places he trusted because the staff didn't stare and the booths felt like little forts. But what got Jamie's attention wasn't the food, it was this waitress, Clara. She moved through the room like she remembered what it felt like to be watched on a stage. Turns out, she had been, once a dancer with a real future until her knee gave out, and now she just drifted between tables with a kind of practiced quietness. But the way she walked, you could tell she hadn't forgotten the music in her bones. Jamie noticed her shoes, that soft bend in the leather you only get from a dancer's foot. When she came by to refill his lemonade, he whispered, "Do you still dance?" You could tell it caught her off guard. She knelt down, a level, and said, "Only when someone dares to lead." And I swear, something shifted right then. Jamie, who barely spoke, did something none of us expected. He stood. Not gracefully, his knees wobbled, his back stiff, but he stood, and he reached out his hand to Clara. No fanfare, no big gesture, just a quiet offer to lead, even if he wasn't sure he could. Clara looked at his hand for a second, then set down her tray, wiped her hands, and took it. The music changed. The whole place kind of leaned and forks paused, conversations faded, and for a second you could hear the uncertainty in every shuffle of Jamie's feet. He moved. Awkward, slow, left foot dragging, right foot jerking to keep up, but it was movement. Real, honest, a kid daring to be seen. Clara didn't guide him, didn't hide the wobble, just matched him, step for step, letting him decide the pace. Around them, a couple stopped dancing, a waiter froze mid-pour, and you could feel the tension, that hush when people don't know if they should stare or look away. Jamie stumbled. Someone laughed, a quick, nervous sound that hung in the air, but Clara just smiled at him, barely enough to say, "I'm still here." She didn't fix his steps, didn't hide the stumble, just let him lead, and suddenly the room started to follow his beat instead of the band's. I guess that's when it hit me. Sometimes leadership isn't about getting it right. It's about being brave enough to let someone else try. Kids at another table watched wide-eyed. Jamie made it a few steps, then looked up at Clara, voice shaking. "Is it okay?" She nodded. "It's perfect." Not as a lie, but because it was the rawest, most honest kind of dance you can do. Harlan, Jamie's dad, came back in right then, phone still in his hand, and he stopped cold. Here was his son, the boy he'd spent years protecting from every fall, out there moving, wobbling, but standing on his own. For a second, you could see Harlan's instinct, step in, shield, rescue. But he didn't. He just stood there, stuck between fear and pride, and watched his son lead, realizing maybe for the first time that being a dad wasn't always about pulling someone up. Sometimes it was about getting out of the way. The whole place was silent, not awkward, just reverent, like nobody wanted to break the spell. Jamie led, Clara followed, and nobody told them how to do it. On the ride home, nothing was said, but you could feel the change. Jamie looked out the window, legs swinging, and finally, quietly, he said, "I don't think I need you to hold my hand so much anymore." Harlan just looked at him, all those years of scraped knees and second guesses hanging in the silence, and finally nodded. Jamie smiled, not big, but real, and I think both of them knew things wouldn't go back to how they were before. Next morning, Harlan went back to the restaurant. Clara was there, wiping down glasses, and he asked her straight up, "Weren't you afraid he'd fall?" She said no, she was afraid no one would follow. That hit him harder than he expected. All those years trying to protect Jamie from the world, when maybe what Jamie needed was someone to trust him enough to let him try, even if he fell. Clara told him, people like Jamie, they're used to being guided. But your son, he invited someone to move with him. That's leadership. After that, Harlan followed Clara to a community dance studio, nothing fancy, just a bunch of kids, braces on legs, some with walkers, all learning to move however they could. Clara showed a kid how to shift his weight, didn't flinch when he stumbled, just let him try again. Harlan stood there, suit and all, and realized he'd spent years teaching his son to survive, but not how to lead. Clara just told him, step where he steps, not where you want him to go. So Harlan tried. He followed. A few weeks later, at a spring festival, Jamie took the stage, no music, no routine, just himself. He walked out, took a step, then another. Nothing fancy, nothing rehearsed. But then, one by one, people in the audience started standing, mirroring his steps, a woman in her 40s, a guy in a wheelchair, parents, teenagers. They weren't following the beat, they were following him. Jamie never looked up, never noticed the small crowd moving with him. But backstage, Clara and Harlan watched, tears in their eyes. That's the thing. Sometimes the most powerful kind of leadership doesn't look like confidence, doesn't sound like authority. It stumbles, it shakes, but it moves anyway. Jamie led not because he was strong, but because he had the heart to take a step. And Clara followed, not because she had to, but because she trusted him. That's what leadership is, letting go, trusting, following, even when you're used to being the one in charge. So yeah, next time you think about what it means to lead, or to let someone else lead, ask yourself, are you guiding, or are you just holding on too tight? Because sometimes, letting go and following takes more courage than leading ever did. If you've ever followed someone who wasn't perfect, who just had the guts to move, share your story, drop a comment. Tell us what you think about real leadership and who gets to decide what it looks like. Because honestly, sometimes the ones who stumble the most are the ones who change the dance for everybody.